I could hear my heartbeat in my ears. The rain made everything feel surreal, like this was happening to someone else. Grant threw my engagement ring into my tote bag, like it was spare change. We were standing in the parking lot outside our apartment building, beside my 10-year-old gray Honda, with rain collecting in the cracks of the asphalt. He had just asked me, for the third time that week, to move $42,000 from my emergency fund into a mortgage account under his name so the lender would see stability. When I said no, his face changed. Not hurt. Insulted. "I can't marry someone who thinks small about money," he said. The ring landed against my laptop charger with a dull little click. Then he looked at my car, my work flats, my old coat, and said, "You're 32, renting, driving that thing, and still acting like you're one promotion away from mattering." My name is Mallory Whitaker. And what Grant did not know was that the contract I had signed that morning required on-site security, confidential access, and a clearance review he would never pass. My phone buzzed in my pocket as he walked away. Subject line: confidential contract, onboarding begins Monday. Security required on-site. The wipers in my car squeaked as I drove. The sound reminded me I needed to replace them. Another thing I had been handling alone while planning our future. I stood in the rain with my phone glowing in my hand. The message was from my program director, Odette Ames. "Congratulations, Mallory. Contract onboarding begins Monday. Due to confidential access requirements, security will be present on site." I read it twice. Then I looked toward the apartment window where Grant was already moving around, probably packing the espresso machine he insisted was his contribution to our shared life. Part of me wanted to run upstairs and show him the message. "See? I matter. See, I was not thinking small. See? You were wrong." That urge embarrassed me more than the breakup itself. Because even with my ring sitting in the bottom of my tote bag, some wounded part of me still wanted a man who had just humiliated me to approve of my worth. So I locked my phone screen, picked up the ring from my bag, put it carefully in the glove compartment, and drove to my sister Tessa's house without telling Grant anything. Some victories are quieter than others. This one felt like closing a door I had been holding open too long. I thought about all the times I had defended him to myself, all the excuses I made when he forgot important dates, all the times I told myself he was just stressed. Now I saw it clearly. He had been building a story where I was the problem all along. Grant's message reached my family before I did. By the time Tessa opened the door, her face had that careful softness people wear when they already know bad news, but not the truth. Grant had written to both families. "Mallory and I are taking space. Unfortunately, she has been unwilling to plan responsibly for our financial future." Financial future. The man who wanted my savings in his mortgage account had made me sound reckless. His mother wrote that marriage required trust and compromise. His brother said Grant needed a woman with growth mindset. My own aunt asked if I had let fear ruin a good man's plans. I stood in Tessa's kitchen, soaked from the rain, and laughed once. It sounded terrible. Tessa took my phone, read the messages, and said firmly, "Do not answer anyone while you're bleeding." So I did not. I sat at her table, wrapped in a towel, and watched Grant turn my boundary into a character flaw. That was the first lesson of the breakup. Controlling people hate your no more than they ever loved your yes. I opened another tab in the spreadsheet. This one tracked promises. Every time Grant said he would contribute, every time the deadline passed, every time I covered it quietly. The pattern was undeniable. I had a spreadsheet because I am the kind of woman Grant mocked until tax season. Rent, utilities, groceries, insurance, wedding deposits, travel expenses, emergency repairs, every shared expense from the past 2 years, carefully documented. At first, I opened it to calm myself. Then I saw the pattern clearly. I paid the boring things. Rent gaps when he was between projects, grocery runs, car insurance when he was between bonus cycles, his certification course because he said it would help our future. Grant paid for visible things. Restaurant dinners he posted on social media, the watch he wore to lender meetings, the engagement party bar tab he bragged about covering, even though I had quietly paid the venue deposit myself. He had not wanted a financially responsible partner. He had wanted a silent sponsor. Tessa leaned over my shoulder and whispered, "Mallory, he didn't leave because you think small about money. I stared at the spreadsheet until my vision blurred. He left because I stopped funding his picture of success. That sentence changed everything. My hands shook as I downloaded the statements, not from fear, from rage that had nowhere safe to go yet. So I channeled it into organization, every file labeled, every date recorded, every transaction documented. The transfer was for $3,800. Memo, venue correction. But the venue had already been paid in full. I called the bank the next morning, calm enough to sound like someone else. The representative confirmed the money went toward Grant's personal credit card. I sat very still at Tessa's kitchen table. That account had wedding money in it, most of it mine. Grant had used it to pay down his card before applying for the mortgage, the same mortgage he wanted in his name only. I did not call him. I wanted to. I wanted to scream so badly my jaw hurt. Instead, I downloaded statements, saved PDFs, and emailed a family law attorney named Maren Holt, recommended by Tessa's coworker. Maren replied with one sentence that felt like a hand on my shoulder. Do not confront him verbally. Preserve records and communicate in writing. That became my new rule. No more emotional negotiations with a man who edited reality faster than I could explain it. Documentation became my defense. Silence became my strategy. I had worked at Arden for 3 years. It was a good company, stable, respectful, the kind of place where people stayed for decades. Grant used to call it boring. Now it was protecting me. On Monday, 2 security officers stood beside our office reception desk. Not dramatic, not movie style, just navy jackets, visitor logs, temporary badges, and sealed equipment cases. Still, everyone noticed. My Arden technical documentation usually handled engineering manuals, compliance packages, and maintenance procedures. Important work, but not the kind that made security show up before coffee. Odette met me in the lobby. Mallory, we'll start your access briefing at 9. My coworker June looked at me with wide eyes. Your access briefing? I nodded, trying to act normal while my life felt like it had split in half. Upstairs, Odette explained the contract. Protected transportation infrastructure documentation, restricted technical details, controlled client communications, and strict reporting rules if anyone asked about the project outside approved channels. My stomach tightened. Grant worked for a subcontracting firm called Bellpoint Systems that chased infrastructure bids. Suddenly, his obsession with my small career felt less like ignorance, and more like poor timing. I thought about all the casual dinners where Grant had asked about my work. At the time, I thought he was being interested, supportive. Now I wondered what he had been listening for. What details he thought he might use later. The security briefing was simple and terrifying. Do not discuss project details at home. Do not share contract names casually. Do not confirm access level to unauthorized people. Report unusual questions, pressure, or contact from anyone tied to potential vendors or subcontractors. The security manager, Calvin Dre, looked at each of us when he said that last part. I thought of Grant asking about my boring documentation job, whenever he wanted to feel superior. I thought of the way he suddenly cared about my savings right before bidding season. I told myself not to be paranoid. Then Calvin said, sometimes the person asking does not think they are doing anything wrong. They think closeness gives them access. Closeness. That word landed hard. At lunch, I checked my phone. Grant had texted for the first time since the breakup. We should talk like adults. Also, what's with security at your office? My fingers went cold. He had noticed, already, and he was asking questions I could not answer. Walking into Calvin's office felt like confessing, even though I had done nothing wrong. Even though Grant was the one asking inappropriate questions. Years of being made to feel too sensitive had left their mark. I did not reply to Grant. I walked to Calvin's office with my phone in my hand. My heart pounded like I was betraying someone, which was ridiculous, because Grant had thrown my ring into my tote bag in the rain. Still, reporting him felt severe. Calvin read the message once. Then he said, "You did the right thing." He did not act alarmed. He did not accuse Grant of espionage. He simply documented the contact, asked about Grant's employer, and reminded me not to respond without guidance. That calm helped. Abuse thrives in confusion. Policy gave me a floor to stand on. By the end of the day, legal sent me a short, approved response. I am not permitted to discuss workplace security or confidential client matters. Please communicate only about personal logistics by email. I sent it. Grant replied 3 minutes later, "Wow, you get one little contract and suddenly you're important?" I almost smiled, not because it was funny, because he had finally noticed what I had been building all along. The coffee shop was busy, people typing on laptops, friends laughing over drinks, normal Tuesday afternoon life. Meanwhile, I was sitting across from a man who had just tried to extract classified information, and he did not even realize how serious it was. Grant asked to meet at a coffee shop to divide wedding expenses. I went with Marin's advice: public place, written agenda, no discussion of work. He arrived wearing the navy coat he bought after I paid his certification fee. The first thing he said was not hello. "So what exactly are you working on that needs security?" I took out a printed expense summary. "We're here to discuss wedding costs." He leaned back in his chair. "Relax. I'm not asking for secrets." That was how he always did it. Make the boundary sound dramatic. Make the request sound harmless. I slid the spreadsheet across the table. He barely looked at it. Then he said, "My firm might be bidding on some related infrastructure work. If your company's involved, you could at least tell me whether we're wasting our time." I folded my hands in my lap. "No." His face hardened. "There it is, small thinking." This time the words did not enter me. They hit the boundary and fell. I stood up, left the spreadsheet, and walked out. I wrote the account slowly, pausing to remember exact phrases. Calvin had said precision mattered. That vague reports were useless, so I gave him precision. Every word Grant said, every question he asked, every boundary he crossed. Grant worked for Bellpoint Systems. When Calvin heard the name, his expression changed. Not dramatically, just enough. Bellpoint was on a preliminary vendor interest list for a related subcontract. That did not mean Grant knew anything sensitive. It did not mean he had been sent by anyone. It meant his questions mattered. Calvin asked me to write a detailed account of the coffee meeting. Time, place, exact wording. Whether he mentioned bidding, whether he asked about client identity, whether I answered. I wrote everything carefully, no embellishment, no revenge, just facts. When I finished, Calvin said, "You are not in trouble." I had not realized how badly I needed to hear that. Then he added, "But if he contacts you again about work, forward it immediately." That night, Grant emailed, subject, "Don't be like this." Inside he wrote, "I helped you believe in yourself. The least you can do is help me avoid a bad business move." I stared at that sentence until the screen blurred. The folder sat on my desktop. Grant, records. It looked so official, so final, like I was preparing for court. Maybe I was. Not criminal court, but the court of my own clarity. I read that sentence until anger replaced hurt. "I helped you believe in yourself." Grant used to say that whenever I achieved something, my certification, he pushed me. My raise, he kept me focused. My contract selection, apparently he had helped me believe I could do it. In reality, he complained when I studied, interrupted when I practiced presentations, told me my job sounded administrative whenever I felt proud. He had not built my confidence. He had rented space inside it and called himself the foundation. I forwarded the email to Calvin and Marin. Then I created a folder on my laptop labeled Grant, Records. Not because I wanted to obsess, because I was done letting him scatter pieces of the truth across texts, bank statements, and memories. The next morning, Odette called me into her office. She said, "Mallory, we need to discuss your access terms." My stomach dropped. For one awful second, I thought Grant had cost me the contract, that his questions had made me a liability. I thought about leaving, quitting the contract, moving to a different city, starting over somewhere Grant would never find me. But that felt like letting him win, letting his chaos determine my future. I stayed. Odette closed the door gently. That helped. "We are not removing you," she said before I could ask. I exhaled so hard my shoulders hurt. Because of Grant's connection to a potential vendor, my access terms had to be documented more carefully. On-site security would remain during restricted review sessions. My workstation would move to a controlled project room. Personal devices would be limited near project materials. It sounded intense. It also sounded like trust. They were not punishing me for Grant's behavior. They were protecting the contract because I had reported him. Odette said, "Confidential access is not only about what you know, it is about whether you can be trusted under pressure." I thought about Grant's voice in the parking lot. "You're one promotion away from mattering." I looked at the access letter in my hands. He was wrong. I already mattered. That was why the rules followed me. That was why security stayed. That was why I was sitting in this office instead of packing my desk. The elevator ride felt long. Calvin stood beside me in silence, professional, protective. The opposite of everything Grant had ever been. When the doors opened to the restricted floor, I stepped out. Grant stayed below. I did not know Bell Point had been invited to a general vendor information session until I saw Grant in our lobby. He stood near the visitor check-in desk with 2 coworkers, wearing the smile he used when networking with people who had things he wanted. Then he saw me. Not at reception, not behind a desk, walking beside Calvin toward the restricted elevator with a red access badge clipped to my blazer. His smile died. For 1 second, pure calculation crossed his face. Then he called out, "Mallory." Calvin paused. I did not. Grant stepped forward like he had the right. Security did not touch him. They did not need to. Calvin simply said, "Sir, please remain with your group." Grant's coworkers looked at him. Grant gave a forced laugh. "Sorry, personal connection." Personal connection. He used the phrase like a key. For the first time, it did not open anything. I kept walking. The elevator doors closed. Grant stayed in the lobby. I saved the message in 3 places: my phone, my laptop, the cloud. Tessa used to laugh at my backup systems. Now they were saving me. Documentation was power, especially when someone tried to rewrite history. Grant's message arrived at 6:11 p.m. "You didn't have to act like you didn't know me. You embarrassed me in front of my team." I stared at the screen. He had ended our engagement in a parking lot, drained wedding funds, questioned me about confidential work, turned our families against me. But apparently my refusal to acknowledge him during a security-controlled moment was humiliation. I sent no reply. Marin did. "Please direct all personal financial communication through this office. Do not contact Miss Whitaker regarding confidential work, workplace access, or vendor matters." Grant responded to her within 20 minutes. "This is ridiculous. She's using some fake security thing to punish me." Fake security thing. I forwarded that too. Calvin's reply was short. Noted. That word did not look dramatic, but in compliance language, it had weight. Grant was building his own file, one entitled "Message at a Time," and I was documenting every piece. I looked at the notebook again, the pages where I had practiced technical terms. I had been so proud of myself for studying, for learning, for preparing. Now those same notes felt like evidence of vulnerability, of how close Grant had been to my work. The vendor question came through official channels. That was what made it dangerous. Bell Point asked whether documentation access would include maintenance sequencing assumptions for protected transit nodes. I stared at the wording. That phrase was close enough to restricted material to make my skin prickle. Not exact, not illegal on its face, but oddly specific for a general vendor information session. Calvin asked if I had used similar words around Grant. No, I had not discussed the project at all. Then I remembered something. Before the breakup, Grant had scrolled through my notebook while looking for a pen. He had laughed at my cryptic work scribbles. I never wrote client secrets down, but I did write general study phrases for access training, protected nodes, maintenance sequence, confidential assumptions, individually harmless, together, useful to someone guessing. Calvin documented it. The procurement team flagged Bell Point's question for review. Grant had not stolen secrets. He had revealed intent. I thought about the email chain, the casual arrogance in Grant's words, the way he wrote about me like I was a resource, not a person, not someone he had claimed to love, just an asset to be leveraged. The email trail did not show criminal mastermind behavior. It showed arrogance. Grant had written to his manager, "My ex has access on the client documentation side. She won't say much, but security around her suggests the work involves protected transit maintenance. We should tailor questions accordingly." My ex. Not Mallory. Not my former fiancé. My ex, like I was an asset he had lost, but still expected to depreciate for his benefit. His manager replied, "Do not rely on personal contacts. Keep questions within public information." That should have stopped him. Grant wrote back, "She owes me after everything I did for her career." There it was again, owes me. Procurement forwarded the trail to compliance. Bell Point was warned. Grant was removed from the vendor session list. And I realized something strange. Grant had spent years calling me small, but the moment I had access to something big, he assumed it belonged partly to him. That assumption was his mistake. Tessa called that night. She asked if I was okay. I said I did not know yet. That okay felt like a moving target. Some days I felt strong, some days I felt exhausted. Both could be true. Grant texted me from a new number. "I can't believe you reported me." I looked at the message and felt nothing for 2 full seconds. Then grief hit. Not because I wanted him back, because there had been a time when I would have carried his panic like it was mine. I forwarded the message, blocked the number. Marin sent a formal cease contact notice. That afternoon, Tessa sent me a screenshot from Grant's brother. He might lose his role because Mallory overreacted. I closed my eyes. There it was. The old story again. His choices. My consequences. Except this time, the people with authority were reading timestamps, not family opinions. Bellpoint's compliance office contacted Calvin to confirm that I had not disclosed project details. He confirmed. They thanked me for reporting properly. Grant's review continued. Mine did not. That difference was everything. I had done nothing wrong. And the record proved it. The mortgage had been Grant's dream, not ours. He had picked the condo, he had chosen the neighborhood, he had planned the layout. I was supposed to fund it. That was my role. Silent investor in his vision. Grant's mortgage approval depended on stable employment. Of course it did. The condo deposit he made with wedding money was suddenly at risk because Bellpoint placed him on administrative leave pending compliance review. Marin told me this only because it affected repayment negotiations. I sat with that information quietly. A past version of me would have felt guilty. This version felt clear. I had not cost Grant his mortgage. He had built a mortgage application on money he took, status he performed, and a job he jeopardized by trying to use me. His attorney proposed delaying repayment until employment matters stabilized. Marin rejected it. Politely, firmly, the demand remained: return the $3,800 credit card payment, repay the $7,500 condo transfer, and cover his documented share of non-refundable wedding expenses. No insults, no pleading, just math. Grant had broken up with me over money. Now money was answering him in full sentences. Marin's emails were short, direct, no drama, no emotional manipulation, just facts and requests. It felt revolutionary after 2 years of Grant's circular arguments, where facts changed based on his mood. Grant's defense was exactly what I expected, and still somehow worse. He said I had voluntarily helped him improve his financial position because we were planning a future together. He said the transfers were gifts. He said I was only demanding repayment because I was angry about the breakup. Marin asked for evidence that I intended the money as a gift. Grant produced nothing. I produced statements, spreadsheet entries, text messages, and one email where he wrote, "I'll put it back after closing. Promise." Promise. The smallest contract people use when they do not want accountability. His attorney's tone changed after that, so did mine. I stopped thinking of this as recovering money from a failed relationship. I started thinking of it as recovering myself from a pattern. Every dollar mattered less than the record. Every record said the same thing. I had trusted him. He had counted on that trust being hard to prove. He was wrong. I thought about satisfaction, what it would feel like to see Grant fail. But that was not what I felt. I felt relieved, like a weight had lifted, like I could finally stop bracing for the next manipulation. I was not in Grant's compliance interview. But the outcome told the story. Bellpoint found he violated internal conflict rules by referencing a personal relationship in vendor strategy, asking me about confidential access, and continuing contact after being told to stop. They did not accuse him of stealing classified information. Real life is rarely that dramatic. They accused him of poor judgment, boundary violations, and creating procurement risk. That was enough. His role changed immediately. He was removed from business development duties and placed into a lower internal support position pending final decision. The condo lender delayed approval. The vendor opportunity disappeared. The promotion he expected evaporated. Tessa asked if I felt satisfied. I thought about it. Then I said, I feel safer. That was more honest than satisfaction. Safety is what revenge looks like when you stop wanting applause. Accountability is what justice looks like when you stop needing drama. I signed my name carefully. Mallory Whitaker. Not Mallory and Grant, not Mrs. Anybody, just my name. On a contract I had earned, protecting work I had secured, building a future I controlled. Odette called me into the restricted room on a Friday afternoon. The client had reviewed my documentation package. They wanted me added to the second phase. More responsibility, more compensation, longer term. And yes, continued security protocols. I signed the contract amendment with a steady hand. For years, Grant made my careful life sound like failure. My old car, my savings, my quiet job, my refusal to gamble on his image. Now those same habits made me valuable, reliable, clear, trustworthy under pressure. Odette said, "You handled a personal risk without letting it compromise professional judgment." I went home to Tessa's guest room and cried in the shower. Not pretty crying. Relief crying. The kind that comes when your body finally understands you are not going back. Then Marin emailed. Grant wanted to settle. His leverage had disappeared. His timeline had collapsed, and his attorney knew it. The settlement was not revenge, it was restoration, not of the relationship, of the truth, of the record, of my right to say what had actually happened, without Grant editing the story. Grant's first offer was insulting. Half the money, no acknowledgement, mutual silence. Marin sent back the records, all of them, the wedding account transfer, the credit card payment, his promise to return funds, the venue invoices, his messages asking about security, his continued contact after legal notice, his continued attempts to leverage my access. His attorney replied within a day, full repayment, split of documented cancellation costs, written confirmation that the transfers were not gifts, communication only through counsel. I read the terms twice. No apology, no explanation, no confession that he had tried to make me feel small because he was afraid I might become larger than his control. But I did not need his confession. The settlement said enough. He had broken up with me over money. Now he was returning mine. The signature line looked plain. That made it powerful. I walked through my new apartment slowly, touching the walls, opening the closet, standing on the balcony, every inch of it mine. No shared lease. No compromise on furniture, no performance of a life I did not want. Grant was terminated from Bell Point 2 days before I signed my new lease. Not because I ruined him, because his own company concluded he created procurement risk, ignored boundaries, and used a personal relationship inappropriately for business advantage. His mortgage application collapsed after his employment changed. The condo went back on the market. The life he tried to buy with my money, and his performance of success disappeared in silence. No public explosion, no dramatic scene, no final speech, just emails, forms, withdrawals, and consequences. I signed my lease on a 1-bedroom apartment with morning light and a tiny balcony. The rent was reasonable. The neighborhood was quiet. My Honda fit perfectly in the assigned parking spot. For the first time in years, nobody made my practicality feel like poverty. I slept on a mattress on the floor that first night and felt richer than I ever felt beside him. Security did not make me important. It recognized that I already was. June asked me later what the best part was: the promotion, the money, the security clearance. I said it was the badge, not because it looked impressive, but because it said someone trusted me. And that trust was not conditional on silence. The day we completed Phase 1, Calvin handed me a permanent restricted access badge. It was not flashy, just my name, photo, access code, and a red stripe across the bottom. I stared at it longer than I should have. Grant had thrown my ring into my tote bag like losing him would lower my value. This badge did not replace the ring. It meant something better. Trust I had earned. Authority I did not have to beg for. A future not tied to whether a man thought my savings were useful. Odette announced my expanded role in a small team meeting. People clapped politely, professionally, the way coworkers clap when they actually respect what happened. June hugged me afterward and whispered, "You look lighter." I smiled because she was right. Not happier in the simple way. Lighter. Like I had been carrying someone else's insecurity and finally set it down. Like I had permission to take up space again. The desk sits by my window now. Solid. Stable. Wide enough for my work, deep enough for my life. Grant used to say I thought too small. He was wrong. I thought carefully, and careful thinking built this. I kept the ring in my glove compartment for 6 months. Not because I missed Grant. because every time I saw it, I remembered the sound it made hitting my laptop charger. That small, ugly click had been the end of one life and the beginning of another. Eventually, I sold it. I used part of the money to buy a proper desk for my apartment. Solid wood, wide enough for 2 monitors, mine. The rest went into the emergency fund Grant once tried to drain. On the first anniversary of the breakup, I drove my old Honda to work, parked under the security camera, clipped on my restricted access badge, and walked into the building without looking over my shoulder. My life was not glamorous in the way Grant used to worship. It was better. Stable, protected, earned. He broke up with me over money because he thought money proved value. He was wrong. Money showed me the truth. Access showed me trust. And losing him showed me I was never small. I was just standing too close to someone who needed me to shrink so he could feel tall.